Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've been thinking about the Pledge of Allegiance for the last few days. I don't think that I've ever done it this deeply. It started last Friday after finishing up a committee hearing where I heard a fellow delegate say that not all skinfolk are kinfolk. It felt out of place, particularly to hear in a room meant to facilitate the exchange of ideas. That's when the pledge popped into my head, in particular a phrase, one nation, and a single word, indivisible. Even during our most divided times, there has always been a link between Americans, a shared culture, a point of reference, and increasingly, as we break down social barriers, shared family members. It may seem odd as they may not look anything like you. It's hard to truly divide us. Yes, we'll argue with one another, but do we ever try to truly shut each other down? No, Mr. Speaker, we don't. When I joined the Air Force, that inability to divide us became even more apparent. I was in a new environment, learning a new skill and meeting people from all over the country. And yet, from the beginning, there was a camaraderie, a fundamental respect. We all knew we were Americans, and we all knew that we had come, at least in part, to serve this country. Our country. Many of these men and women became my family, not by blood, but by a shared understanding that we're all in this together. I appreciated that unity because when I was young, my mother and I didn't have much of that. See, my biological father, a disabled Army veteran, brought my mother and I from the Bronx to New Jersey. He bought a small house, gotten a job, and even started his own business. And then, all over the course of just a few months, it all fell from underneath him. And to cope, he turned to drugs and alcohol. My mother was left with me, and she made the decision to return to the Bronx. She got a job and found us a small apartment. And even though I was too young to remember this, she tells me, she turned to me as we were driving back from Jersey and said, "Everything is going to be okay. It's just me and you now, son." And I don't know how she made it. I don't know that I could have made it. I think that's why the American experiment has been such an inspiring idea to me. Much of my childhood was in a house divided, but we somehow still kept it together. As I got older, I began to realize how different we can be from one another, and yet we are all Americans. We all stood for the Pledge of Allegiance. We all seem to be, at least on some level, familiar. Thus, I am faced with this unescapable truth. This country remains strong not because of or in spite of our differences, but because we have all signed on to the idea that we're supposed to treat each other like family. We've all signed on to the idea that we are one nation and that no matter how we bicker with one another, we will remain indivisible. That's why what my fellow delegates said to me felt off. Because there was a disagreement and it felt as if she wanted to perpetrate it and not end it. There was no trace of the inherent agreement that I know we have with one another. And so I would submit this to you. Not all kinfolk are skinfolk. It's broader than that. It's more encompassing than that. The people who I consider to be my family go beyond race, ethnicity, gender, and yes, even sometimes creed. I refuse to surrender to the narrative of division. I refuse to surrender to our baser instincts, which stand in direct opposition to everything that this country has achieved and everything that my brothers and sisters have taught me. And I will never, ever close my door or my heart to someone who disagrees with me. And that is the thesis of America. That is why after 200 years of everything from protests to wars to simple dinner squabbles, we are still here in the same house. To disagree in America is an act of faith and respect. Faith in the vision of our republic and respect of the fundamental truth that to move forward as a society and a community, to move forward as family, as kin, we have to respect one another, even in our time of disagreement, and not demean ourselves with what is frankly ugly behavior. We are better than that. A phrase like no skin folk, like not all skin folk are kinfolk, has no place here. We are serious people, gathered to do good things for the people who elected us. Our constituents expect more of us, and I think they deserve those expectations be met. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.